Let's date forever. Here's your weekly dose of relationship fuel with Sammy and Nathan Yeager. Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about the different shapes and structures of families today, consciously making a choice around parenthood, and designing the life you want to live, kids or no kids. But before we dive into that, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
We are fresh off of a plane.
As of 2 o'clock this afternoon, yeah?
Yeah, after spending a week and also in Hobart, so back home again in Sydney, after a week or so of learning and exploring and spending some quality time together. So that's what fueled me up. Was the opportunity to learn and spend some time with 25 other entrepreneurs at a retreat for a few days while you were mountain biking.
That's it, yeah.
And I got the opportunity to connect with some familiar faces and some new faces as well at a retreat hosted by Keith Abraham, who was guest number 1 on the Date Forever podcast, and also Andrew Griffiths, who hosted the retreat for a group of humans who are professional speaking and want to grow that part of their business or their portfolio. So it was really nice to connect with other people who are doing what I want to do. So my career and business tank are feeling pretty full and my to-do list is looking pretty long.
Might have a busy end to the year, I think.
Yeah, well, you can't spend 4 days with Keith Abraham, king of goals, without setting a few more goals.
Yeah, that's it.
But what about you, Nath? What fueled you up?
So I think you hit my fuel up, which was me going mountain biking for a few days. So yeah, definitely one of the things that I'm really passionate about and I just love doing. So I think just outside of that though, like I did a little bit of solo travel. So I spent a couple of nights away by myself and went exploring different parts of Tassie while you were off on your retreat. And so I think that really just reconnecting with myself, making all decisions by myself, and it's definitely one of the things that we talk about in keeping your self-tank fueled up and dating yourself forever. So, yeah, my self-tank is feeling nice and full right now.
Yeah, and it's so good to practice that while you're on holidays, hey, and you have no schedule, like nowhere that you have to be, no decisions that you have to make. It's everything. It's about tapping into like your clarity of what do you want. Yeah,
and I think if you are at home, it's very easy just to maybe sit on the couch and burn away a few hours, whereas when you're on holidays, you really want to make the most of your time away. So, yeah, it really is a great opportunity to tap into what do I really want, what do I want to eat, what do I want to do, what activities, or what do I want to go see, and, yeah, feeling very full right now.
Yeah, I was pretty jealous of some of your solo dates. Seafood, whiskey, wine tasting, nature.
Yeah, I did all right. But now, here's this week's guest.
Today we have Tanya Williams joining us. She is an author of the #1 best-selling book, A Child-Free Happily Ever After. She's the founder of a child-free magazine, loves dogs, and works with business owners. Welcome to the show, Tanya.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. What a book.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been nearly 5 years now since I wrote the book, and love the process. And I think it was very cathartic for me as well, going through that writing process.
Tell us all about it. What sparked your desire or your little inkling to even think about writing the book, let alone publishing it and putting it out in the world?
Look, I'd had the idea quite a few years ago, and I was like, I'm going to write a book. And then I think I did like a chapter or half a chapter, and then it sort of got parked, never to be seen again. And then I had a friend put something up on Facebook, and it was about parent parking. And the debate and the passion and the comments around this whole, parents having special car parks and stuff, it just went off. And I was like, wow, like there's such a for and against about this whole thing and whatever. And I just went, this just makes me want to write about this and write about my experiences being child-free and how we feel about the treatment that like how parents are treated in society versus how we get treated in society, because it got really aggressive at some of the comments and stuff like that. So I went, right, now's the time to do it. So it's that just triggered the idea. And funnily enough, I didn't plan it this way, but from the idea to launch was 9 months. So I always say it was like my little baby. So
you birthed it, your gestational period.
It's like, that's crazy. I sat back and worked out and went, that's 9 months. So I got the idea, started madly writing, found an editor that could help me through that whole process, multiple drafts, the whole sort of thing. And then, 9 months later, after the idea, I launched it out into the world.
Yeah, amazing. It's interesting that it was one of those kind of contentious issues that really sparked it for us, because there is so many of those things as well. There's even things like Mother's Day, Father's Day that are very much dedicated around parents, and then even kids' birthdays and things like that as well. If you're child free, the amount of kids' birthdays you get invited to, and with the understanding, I guess, that there's not going to be that same thing in return for you. So
yeah, and look, there's obviously differences in people's situations as well. So I'm child-free by choice. There are child-free by circumstance. So they're classified typically as childless because they've probably wanted to have children and couldn't have. I think the terminology that we use around it is really important because, I know there's been times where people have assumed that I couldn't have children, not that I didn't want to have children. And as you get older, your experiences change. So your experiences at 20, 30, 40, 50 are all very different as well because of, obviously you're in different, areas of your life, and the conversations that you have are very different as well. So I think it's really important to understand what that looks like as well, because the conversations I was having at age 20 are very, very different than the conversations I have now at age 50. So I've sort of, gone through that whole process.
So Tanya, when you wrote the book, I assume you were 100% certain that you were child-free by choice forever and ever and ever and ever.
Yes.
But when did you actually arrive at that decision for yourself?
I was actually quite young. So I remember being in high school, and when you're in high school and, everyone's talking about what they're going to do with their life, and, so many people that I went to high school with were like, oh, I just want to get married and have 3 kids. And I remember thinking, well, that's a bit sad. There's a bit more to life than just getting married and having kids. What else do you want to do? And I was always very career focused. So for me, I was a product of the 80s. So I used to watch Melrose Place and Dynasty and Dallas and Murphy Brown. And there was all these really strong female role models that had these amazing careers, and they were wealthy and successful, and they didn't have children. So I think there was some influence there from that for me growing up, because I was like, that's what I want. That's the sort of life that I want to have. These women have got, amazing lives, and they don't have children as part of it. So I was always quite vocal when I was younger. I remember in high school going, no, that's not what I want. And I would say it. And of course you get the, oh, you'll change your mind, all that sort of stuff. My parents never really said that a lot to me. I think they always knew that I was very strong-willed and very stubborn and knew my own mind. And they always were very accepting of my decision when I was always like, no, I don't want kids. That's not what I want for my life. I'm going to have this career and I'm going to do these things. I always found it was more people outside of the family that were more, judgmental or would criticize or say things. And it was like, well, you don't really know me that well, so how can you have an opinion on what's best for me? So I knew early on, so as I said, when I was a teenager, that was not what I wanted for me. Some people, that's not the case. They get to, their early 30s and they've got to make those decisions, and they're going, well, I don't really know what I want. I've got friends like that are just like, I could go either way. What do I do? And look, it's one of those things that you can only make that decision for yourself. Now, I am not anti-children. Some of my best friends have, one of my best friends has 4 kids, another one's 3 kids. I am all about choice and making sure that people, in particular women, are making choices that are right for them. Because at the end of the day, even though husbands can say, oh, I'll stay home and raise it, or I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, we know that the most of the, the responsibility falls on the women. And you really have to be 150% on your decision, because it has such a massive impact on everything in your life. So unless you're all in, I think it's like, well, if you're not really sure, it's a really big gamble to take. But at the end of the day, you're the only one that can make that decision for yourself as well. So I'm all about supporting women in their choices, whatever is right for them, whether you want no kids, 1 kid, 10 kids, do what's right for you. But, other people should be accepting of that choice as well, because it's no one else's life except for yours. And that's where I get a bit angry, I suppose, about if people having an opinion about what's best for me. And it's like, well, you know what? I sort of think I know what's best for me in my life because I have to live it. And no one has a right to tell me what I can and can't do with my body. So I'm very passionate about women having choices in their life and doing what's right for them.
So I guess if you don't mind me asking, like early on when you kind of had this mindset already around kids and that you realised that it wasn't a choice for you, I guess what was your relationship status as well? Because quite often when people do get into a relationship and it is going along for a couple of years, the next question always is like, oh, when are you going to have kids? As opposed to like, are you going to have kids, or is kids?
And that dialogue there needs to change as well. It's rather than when, it's like, are you going to have kids? And that's the question we should be asking. But look, I have been with my husband for 28 years. We got together when I was, I think, about 19. So, very young, just left school, first job, that sort of thing. I've always been quite vocal about it with him. Like, I don't want kids, blah, blah, blah. And I think like everything, I'd get it from his parents. Like, oh, you're young, you'll change your mind. And he's from a Catholic family. He's not a practicing Catholic, but his family were quite, they go to church every week and that sort of thing. And I remember when we got engaged, so I think I might have been about 21 and a half or something like that when we got engaged. And I said to him, babe, if you want to have kids, like this is not going to work because I'm not going to have children for you or your family or anyone else who thinks that I should have children. That's not what I want for my life. And I'm very lucky, and my husband is very respectful in terms of women and he said, look, it's your body. He said, it's your decision. He said, because you're the one that has to have it and we know raise it and it's going to impact you more than anything. And he's like, we'll have nieces and nephews. We've got kids around. It's like he can get that fixed. Not that he necessarily has that or really wants that much, I suppose, but he's like, I don't need to have kids. Like he wasn't one of those guys that was like, I have to be a dad. He's great with kids. The kids love him. Like often we can have a barbecue and you'd be like, where's Shane? And he's in with the kids watching kids movies or something like that. So he's got that sort of childish personality, I suppose, where kids like him, and he's good with kids. But the thing is, he can always go, see you, bye. I don't know if they go home, and then he can go and watch his sport and do whatever. So he was always like, look, I'm fine with that. If you change your mind, whatever, like I'm fine with that. He's always just been like, this is about you and your decision. And look, we've checked in over the years as well. Like, we were very young when we got married. I was, 23. He was like 25 when we got married. So
very similar to us, 23 and 24.
There you go. I've always known what I wanted. And we've checked in over the years, and it's like, are you sure that's still what you want? Yep, nah. And look, he's very happy with his lifestyle. We both are. But I'm like, babe, you wouldn't be sitting here having a couple of drinks and watching the football. You'd be out taking kids to soccer or this or that. Like your life would be very, very different to what it is now. So I'm very lucky that he has always just been on board with it and just went, I don't have to be a dad. It's not something that I've ever like, oh my God, I have to do this. So, and that's being on the same page is super, super important, I think.
So when we were dating, Nathan and I had been dating for about 5 years when we got engaged, and we had perpetually, like we'd been asked that question from very early on, like, when are you having kids? And we had perpetually said, oh, in 5 years, in 5 years, in 5 years. And then it was probably, I don't know, maybe like 2016, 17, 18, somewhere around there. We were having brunch with some friends who were at the time very heavily pregnant. Like they were about to have their first child, and they were not the first of our group of friends. They were probably like that.
Yeah, but there was the middle of the
there was at least a dozen or so children already around.
Yeah.
And we'd said, like the same answer we'd always given, in 5 years. And they said, I think you've been saying that for 5 years. And that really sparked a catalyst for like, maybe we should actually like talk about this a bit more.
If we're not getting any closer to...
If the 5 years is still staying further and further away, like, let's explore that. Why is that? Why have we not got closer to that?
But had you guys had that conversation before you got married?
Yeah, I think if you'd asked both of us, I know if you'd asked both of us on our wedding day, like, will you have children? We both would have said yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, from that conversation with friends, we then went away and were like, okay, it's time to actually start talking about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a teenager, I thought I wanted to have like a big family and have 4 kids. And, people who come from big families are often really well-rounded. They've learned to share. They've got inbuilt support network, that beautiful families. That's always been my experience. So I kind of wanted some of that for myself. But I don't know, as we got further and further away from like the idealized teenage life, what you can imagine, oh my gosh, 30 sounds so far away. And then we were there. And it was like, wow, the practicality of 4 kids sounds horrific. That sounds nothing like anything I want to do. We can't go on the holidays we want to go on. We can't live where we want to live. We couldn't drive the car that we wanted to drive. I definitely couldn't have the career that I wanted to do. All of those things. It was like, okay, this is a very much more tactile conversation. But I had somewhere in those sort of between Nathan and I getting married and this conversation, I'd spent about 3 months in Vietnam volunteering to teach English. And one of the sister programs that I was teaching English was also supporting at an orphanage. So I'd had the opportunity to go to an orphanage on a couple of days, and it fundamentally changed my point of view about birthing children. I didn't think it was something that I had a strong desire to do, but from that environment and realizing that there's a lot of children in the world who really need loving and supportive homes, and they don't have them, that really changed something for me. So then we started the conversation of okay, well, we've been saying 5 years, in 5 years, in 5 years. All right, let's agree that if we're going to have children, we're going to adopt a child first. So we're going to explore the foster care system first. And then maybe we will have a biological child after that point, but that's where we're starting.
Yeah.
And then we sat on that for a couple of years and didn't do anything about it. That was just the decision. And then I reckon it was a couple of years later, it was okay, let's go and actually explore this further. Let's go and ask the questions. What does fostering mean? What does adoption mean? What does international adoption mean? We actually had a guest on the show who had operated an orphanage, and that fundamentally changed our point of view of orphanages, adoptions, and the way that it sounds awful, but child distribution happens across the world. And every layer, it's got deeper and deeper to I actually just don't think this is for us.
Yeah. And that's the thing, it's so super important. I'm glad that you've done all that and gone through and done the research, because it's a massive decision. So weighing up your options and going, well, what is going to be right for us? Do we want to have our own kids? Exactly. Do we want to adopt? Do we want to foster? And look, the other thing is you don't have to have children in your life full time to be around children as well, because I know lots of child-free people who are teachers, and they go, love teaching and love being around kids during the day, but geez, I really look forward to going home and having that time by myself. Or they mentor, or they, they're involved with kids in other ways, or they've got nieces and nephews that they spend a lot of time with. So I think the important message is around, it doesn't always have to look the same for everyone. Having a family, my definition of a family and the traditional definition of a family is very different. And what a traditional family looks like these days is very different. It's no longer mum, dad, 2 biological kids and a dog. It's whatever you really want it to be. And I think it's really about figuring out what's best for you. As individuals, as a couple, to go, well, what is it that we want our family to look like? My family is me and my 3 dogs. And then I call my family. So I've got close friends who are they basically family. So, I've got a family, but it's such an important thing, but you've got to take the time, I think, to really make an informed decision, because I think often it happens by default, because you date someone, you get married, then by default the next logical step is to have kids. So you just sort of go, often it's buy the house, do this, it's all that checklist of life. And I think that's where, and I certainly, when I interviewed people for the book talking about it, there was people who were I didn't even stop and consider it. I just did it because I just went, oh, that's the next step. And then they did it and went, hang on a minute, what have I done? It's too late now. But they hadn't actually given it any considered thought. And I think that's the important part of the process, regardless of what you decide, looking at your options and going, well, what do I want this to look like? How do we want this to tie in with our lifestyle? Because that's the thing, when people have children, it totally changes your lifestyle and the way that you live and what you can and can't do, exactly like you said. And people like to say, well, you don't have to be, it's about being selfish. And it's no, it's not about being selfish at all. You're not selfish to want to live your life for you, because it's your life. There's nothing selfish about that at all. In fact, I think it's probably more the reverse, because when you hear people talking about having kids, they're like, but I want kids. But because I want it. And it's like, well, isn't that more selfish because it's all about you, not the child?
Or I want people to look after me when I'm old, and
Yeah,
so
which is absolutely not guaranteed ever.
no.
So that's what I mean. So people have these preconceived notions of, oh, but if I have a kid, they're going to look after me. If I do this, like, it's just like, no, you've got to get rid of that and just be really informed and do that research. So I think that's great that you guys have taken the time to do that.
We really did. And like Nathan and I live a very designed life. We try and make most of our big decisions very intentionally. We have an annual game plan day every year to plan the next 12 months. And that connects to our like big 10-year vision. There's a vision board behind us of some really big things that we want to achieve. But there were definitely a few years there where it felt like limbo, and probably more so for me because I was trying to make like career decisions around whether or not I was or wasn't going to need to take maternity leave, or whether or not I could or couldn't start working for myself, or if I was going to need a bit more stability and security for that. But like I went on a like deep personal sort of journey to arrive at that answer. Like I went and read Panic Years by Nell Frizzle, which is a beautiful look at those years for women in their late 20s to mid 30s, where those are the panic years. You're finding a partner, if you want to have children, who are you going to have children with, when are you going to have children, and that stress that can set in for women who really want those things. But I also read a book, Regretting Motherhood. The author escapes me in this moment, but it's a compilation of stories by women who were interviewed who regret motherhood. And they told some really harrowing stories about kind of what you said, where they jumped into it, that was just the next thing on the list, and then realized, holy shit, this is for forever. And one of the things that I had never really considered before was that not only do you choose to become a parent, but then your children often go on to have children, and then you go through it again as a grandparent. And I thought, gosh, if you regret that decision once, and then you get roped into being an active grandparent by your child, I thought, gosh, do you know what? If there's going to be two regrets here of regretting having them or regretting not having them, I know which one I want. And I want the one that doesn't impact another human being. I want the one that impacts me. And like you said, there's so many other ways to inject children into our life. And we're very lucky we do have a lot of children in our life. But yeah, those limbo years were really challenging for me.
And look, I call myself a rock star auntie, because I love being an auntie to my friends' kids and my nieces and nephews and stuff like that, because I can go fill them up with sugar, give them all the bad toys that they're not supposed to have, and then go, see ya, bye. But I do love spending that time with them, and I love the fact that I can be a mentor to them, and then I can have the conversations with them that they can't have with mum and dad and stuff like that. Like that, I love that. But I also really love giving them back and walking and go, see, Auntie Tan's going home and have wine now, bye. So you can have the best of both worlds. It's just, it's just a matter of what's right for you and what you want.
Yeah, for sure. I want to go back to something that you touched on very quickly earlier, which was like that traditional family of the like 2.5 kids and 2 dogs kind of thing, and mum and dad. And I guess that's really interesting, because in the timeline of history, like really that was only probably 50 years ago that even was a possibility, like that style of family. Whereas if you go back even further than that, like you were literally raised by a village, and we didn't have a choice about being child-free or...
Well, you abstain from sex.
Yeah, exactly. But you probably will get roped into raising someone else's kid in the village anyway. So...
and families of 10, 12 children as well. Yeah.
So I think we are in a really privileged position to even be able to make the decision really for ourselves. But there's obviously still a lot of complexities around there, because it is something new that society is navigating at the moment, because really, that choice is only 50 years old, I guess. And I guess the shape of families has changed so much in that time as well.
Absolutely, because you've got, gay people having kids, transgender, all of that sort of different people with different orientations, single people, older people that are adopting or fostering, or there's no one sort of rule or anything anymore. It's just changed so much. you've got surrogacy, and you've got like there's so many different factors that play into it these days. I think it's good because it gives people choices as well. So there's not that just you have to meet a man and then you have to get, pregnant, and then you have a boy or a girl, and like, we know that the world looks so different these days. So I think it's good that we have the choices and the options. And you're right, it really is a privilege, because when you think of some of the countries in the world, not everywhere is like that. There's, a lot of traditional countries where women aren't allowed to have a choice at all with what happens with their body, whether they're allowed to have children or not. And if they aren't, then they are ostracized by their family and society and stuff like that. So in our world, we are certainly very privileged to be able to make those choices. I mean, look what's happened in the US with the abortion laws and, all that sort of stuff. You would never think something like that would ever happen. It's like, what we're living in 2023. How can that can even happen in the world? So, it's unfortunate that not everyone has the choices and the right to do what they want, because too often people are put in circumstances where they don't have the money to get out of, or they don't have the resources, or the education, I think, is really important as well, because we've seen across the world that there are countries that don't want girls to have an education, because when you have an education, you have choices, and they don't want that. So that's why I think it's so super important to be all spreading the word around women having education and having choices and rights, because we know that the impact that it can have, on society and family and people's individual lives.
We've got some friends who we've been friends with for a really long time, and she was if you really want them, we'll do it, and he really wanted kids, and they moved interstate a few years ago, and they made a new network of friends, and in that network of friends they happened to make some really close friends with a couple of child-free couples, and they got this exposure to a totally different life and lifestyle, because they were a little bit older as well. So that, like, okay, and then you make that comparison to friends who are in the thick of raising little people, and that contrast. And it's interesting that with some exposure and some real lived experience, that male friend has decided, actually, I don't think that's for us at all. And that's why I think it's so important what you're doing and what you're sharing. Like, we don't see a lot of modeled kid-free, child-free, happy ever after relationships, and what that can look like and what life can be full of if it's not full of children.
Yeah, and look, it's all about fulfillment, and that's one of the chapters that I've written about in the book is, everyone gets fulfilled in different ways. For some people it is having children, and they love being mums, and they nurture and they do all that sort of stuff. I think I'm quite nurturing, but I'm nurturing with dogs, not children. But, you've got to live your life the way you want it to look like as well. So there's things that I've been able to do in my life that I could never have done if I had children. Like, we've traveled the world, continue to travel the world. But like the ability to have 3 businesses, I couldn't do that if I had children. Like, and I do have beautiful designer shoes, and I drink my nice champagnes, and there's all that sort of stuff. And it might sound superficial to say that, but that's the stuff that I like. And if I want to spend my money on those things, I can. But if I had kids, I wouldn't be able to. So I think you certainly make sacrifices as a parent, because you've got to go, well, I've got to pay for school fees. I can't go and buy a pair of Jimmy Choos, or, whatever it might be. There's always that sacrifice.
Yeah, it's just the polarity of the decision, isn't it?
There's such different lifestyles. And I remember years ago, probably going back like 20 years ago or more, I had a friend say to me, oh my God, like, she said, I'm so jealous of your life. And I was like, and she had 3 kids. And I said, but why? I said, you made that decision. You wanted those kids. And she says, oh yeah, I love my kids, and I would never take that back. But she said, I look at your life sometimes and go, oh man, like, I'd love that. And I said, well, it's all about choices. You've made your choices. I've made my choice. They look very different, but I think she could see the freedom that I had and the things that I was able to do that she wasn't. And when you've got young kids, like, it's really hard. They're not independent. They're all about you and needing your attention and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's extra hard when they are, young and they need you. I think as they get older, obviously it gets easier because they become more independent. You have a bit more space and time.
Yeah. I also think it's something that you can't truly prepare for. Like, as much as you read, as much as you ask questions, never have you ever had to go with such little sleep. Never have you ever had to keep a tiny little baby alive before. And I think that the reality of all of those things and the impacts of the decision to have children, as much as people can share, I think there's still a lot of unknown. And I know that that's been true for like one of Nate's colleagues who's recently had a baby, who is just like, whoa, we thought we were ready, but what the hell?
But that's the thing, the reality of it, right? Because on Instagram, you see the Instagram, oh, look, and it's all the babies dressed up in the pretty clothes and we're posing for the photos and stuff like that. That's not reality. The reality is that mum hasn't had a shower. She's sleep deprived. Like dad's angry because he's got to go to work and he's had no sleep. Like no one shows, or I shouldn't say, it's very rare to see the actual reality of what actually goes on when there's a newborn baby or a young toddler or whatever. You see the moments, like you see the birthday party and you see the fun bits, but very rarely do people show the actual real crappy shit that happens behind the scene, right? Because everyone no one wants to put that out there. They want to have this facade of this is what, oh, we're all happy and it's just like, we know that's not reality, you know, and they should be, I think more parents should be honest about what that looks like.
So Tanya, if someone is listening to this episode, whether or not they're single or they're in a relationship and they're on the fence, they're in limbo, they're where I was a few years ago, what would you encourage them to do? Because, you know, we're on the Date Forever podcast talking about dating for forever, and this is a forever decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, one of the exercises I've got in the book is about looking at what your life looks like in a few years' time. So if you 20 or whatever, going, what do I want my life to look like when I'm 30? What do I want my life to look like when I'm 40 or 50 or 60? Like, do I want to be surrounded by grandkids and that sort of thing? Well, obviously, if that's the case, then you need to have children or some sort of, whether it's adopted or your own or whatever. If you go, I could probably live without that. Like, I don't need that. So you really need to sort of, I suppose, sit down and take a bit of a look into the future and go, well, yeah, I might, at 20, I might be fine with this decision, but am I going to be fine with this decision at 40 or at 60 or whatever that might look like? So I think that's an important exercise. I think it's really important to be on the same page as your partner in particular. So if you are dating or in a relationship, like I've seen so many instances where people have just assumed that they knew what the other person wanted and they haven't had a conversation. They went, oh, but I thought you wanted to have kids. I thought you wanted to have kids. No. So it's like, you've got to have the conversation. And sometimes it's not an easy conversation to have, especially if you're first dating someone. Like I know a lot of child-free people that are single are like, oh my God, like when do you have that conversation about do you want kids or not? Because if it's too early, you don't want to scare them off. But at the same time, do I want to waste my time dating someone who...
Why not scare them off if they want the opposite to you?
That's true, I suppose. But it's like, it's a conversation that you have to have, because if they're going, oh my God, yes, I want to have 5 kids, and you're like, shit, I don't want any, then probably better to call that off sooner rather than later if you're not on the same page. So you need to be on the same page. I think that's an important conversation to have, but also with your family as well. I think you need to, if you make that decision or you're going through that, explain to your family where you're at and why you're trying to make this decision, because most parents are like, well, I want you to give me grandkids, right? And when are you going to give me grandkids and stuff? And it's just like, well, hang on, like you need to understand this is my life. You made decisions that were for you. I need to do the same thing for me. So sitting them down and having the conversation with them and saying, well, you don't pressure me. Let me come to the choice that I need to make, and you need to accept the decision. But yeah, I think it's just really important that you are on the same page and you have those conversations. And as you guys have done, do the research. Like go and have a look at what are my options.
We researched like how much was it going to be to have an au pair, how much was childcare in the areas that we might like to live.
That was one of the non-negotiables if you were going to have kids. It was like a live-in au pair. We were like, we're not doing this ourselves.
We joke, but then we were like, okay, well, what will real estate cost us if we want another bedroom to accommodate this person? How much will we need to save? How much will we need to like? It was very like we thought about it from all of the angles.
That's what you've got to do, right? Because there's all this cost that's involved. So it's all the stuff you've got to buy. It's the childcare, it's the au pair, it's the this, it's that. What are the sacrifices I have to make? So instead of buying this car, I might have to buy this car. What does that mean to your salary?
Yeah, how long will I be out of the workforce? How long will I not be earning super for? Like, what's the compounding impact of that?
People don't think about that stuff often. They just go, I just want a baby. And then they go off and then they go, oh, shit, hang on, I hadn't factored in all these other things.
Yeah. Tanya, thank you so much for joining us. I want to hear a little bit about your own marriage and your relationship, and what does your beautiful, child-free, fueled-up life look like?
Where do I start? Well, as I said, we've been married 28 years. And look, no marriage is perfect. We have had our ups and downs. I'm very lucky to have a very supportive husband who supports my passions and, all the things that I want to do. We're very opposite. So I am very outgoing, very outspoken, very stubborn. And he is very down to earth, laid back, chill, whatever. So that drives me nuts sometimes because he is like that. But at the same time, because we are opposite, we actually give each other what the other one doesn't have. So he brings me back down to earth and be like, honey, why don't we just think about that for a minute rather than you going off on this little tangent? And I, give him, I suppose, stuff that he doesn't have as well. So I think that's why it's worked for us for so long. And look, our life is very much about, the things that we want to do. So, for example, I can design my work life how I want. So I don't work Friday afternoons. My husband finishes work at lunchtime. He's a tradie. So he's up early. He's home early. On a Friday, they finish at lunchtime. So I will typically have Friday afternoons off. So if we want to go and do something, we can. Or even if we're just hanging out at home, we can watch a movie. We can just chill by the pool. So it's all about, what it is we want to do. We travel a lot. We're about to go to Italy for 3 weeks in August.
Oh, beautiful.
And we do it, we do an overseas trip every year at least. We do a lot of domestic travel because of, my work, because I'm a consultant and all I need is a laptop and a Wi-Fi connection. I was just up in Cairns for a week and I was like, I'm going to Cairns for a week, honey, see you, bye. And I went to Cairns and worked and caught up with friends and did all that because I didn't have to worry about kids and childcare and any of that sort of stuff. I do some work with a charity. There's a charity called Pets in the Park. So I do marketing for those guys. They help homeless people with pets and they have clinics to help them with that. So there's causes that I love and support. So I do a little bit of work for those. I love catching up with friends. As I said, I'm a pet sitter, so I spend my days with dogs. So I've designed my life the way I want it to be. I've been very intentional about that as well. I wanted the freedom. I wanted the flexibility. I wanted to be able to do all that and not have to worry about, this responsibility, this massive responsibility of having a child, because I knew that would have a massive impact on my life, my lifestyle, and everything that I wanted to achieve as an adult. And look, I love my life. I would not change it for a minute. As I said, I've got nieces and nephews. One of my friends in Cairns has 4 kids. I've just spent, a few days with them. Love spending time with them. But I don't want that full time. So, I would not change a single thing about the way that we live and our life and our lifestyle. Like I just love it. But again, that's right for me and that's not right for everybody. So it's about doing what's right for you.
And are there any habits or practices or rituals that you and your husband have to keep your relationship fueled up?
Look, I try and make sure we have like date nights and date days and stuff like that. Like he is not so good at that. So I have to sort of go, babe, come on, we're going on a date. Let's go out. So whether it's going to the movies, like tomorrow we're going out for lunch somewhere nice. So it's like, let's go, when you get home, we're going to go out for lunch and have a couple of drinks and stuff like that. I think it's really important to have time together because I think it's easy to be often, like I'm out on my, TV watching, Real Housewives and he's watching sport or something. So you really need to make an effort to spend time together, find some common shows that you can watch, find some common interests that you can do together, things that you both like, that you can go, hey, let's go, and whether it's walking the dogs or going to whatever it might be. So I think it's really important to find that. We do a lot of like long weekends or weekends away and stuff like that as well, just because I find that that's a really good way to reconnect. Because at home, in your home environment, you get stuck in that daily routine and he's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing. And sometimes it can be hard to sort of connect again. So I find that when we go away, when we don't have the dogs or we don't have other people, we're not in our normal routine, we can sit there and we will talk and we do have those conversations over a bottle of champagne or whatever it might be. So I think it's really important as a couple to always put your relationship front and center and spend time on that relationship, because any relationship, whether it's friends, your partner, family, takes work. It takes time and effort, and it's a two-way thing. So I think that's really important that you do that, regardless of your status of whether you've got kids or not. I know friends that have got kids, and it's like, guys, go and do a date night, get someone to look after the kids for a few hours. Like, just have that connection and keep that going, because I think that's often what happens is you lose that until the kids are out of the house, and then all of a sudden you're strangers. because you've spent this like life and it's all been about the kids and you've forgotten about you and your relationship, and that's a bit sad, I think.
Yeah, and that's a big part of this show is about dating for forever through all seasons of life, and choosing yourself and your person over and over again. Tanya, thank you so much for joining us. To say thank you, we've provided a student in Indonesia with a week of classroom education. You kind of already touched on it in this episode, just how powerful education is and how powerful it is for girls in particular. So this project actually focuses on getting little girls into education. So this is in Indonesia, and it's been made possible via our partnership with Buy One, Give One. So thank you so much for being here and sharing with us.
Thank you. I love that. Anything that helps girls have access to education, I think, is fantastic. So that's amazing that you guys are doing that.
Thank you.
No worries. So Tanya, if people want to connect with you or get your book or learn a little bit more about your journey, how can they do that?
They can find me at childfreehappilyeverafter.com.au. There's a bunch of resources on there. I've got a program called a Childfree Choices, which is all about helping people make that decision. I've got the book, obviously. They can find me on Instagram under Childfree Tanya. There's a Facebook page as well, which is Childfree Happily Ever After. But yeah, you can find me on the socials and just Google, and I'll come up somewhere. I've done lots of podcast interviews and lots of stuff in the media. So if you just Google it, you'll find me. And if anyone is listening to this and they'd love to connect, please tell me that you've listened to the podcast. And I love that people have heard these types of stories and stuff as well, because I think that's fantastic, because we're getting it out into the world.
Yeah, that you get to make a choice.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Tanya.
Thanks, guys. So grateful for you guys to think of me and to allow me to share and be part of this episode. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.